Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have an amazing group of panelists, and I'm really excited for our conversation. Today, we're going to talk to some email marketers who have mission-driven organizations, and we're going to share a little bit about what they're doing to drive those missions using email. So Robin, why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about who you are, your mandate, and the DNC.
Sure. I'm Robin. I'm the email director at the Democratic National Committee. The DNC supports candidates all across the country running for state, local, and federal office. We are also the governing body of the entire Democratic Party and also plan the presidential nominating convention every 4 years. I am the email director, so that means that I manage a team that is responsible for engaging our millions of supporters through email. We are also responsible for hitting the party's online fundraising goals, and yeah.
That's pretty comprehensive. Awesome. All right, Yasmin, tell us about yourself and about the ASPCA.
My name is Yasmin. I work for the ASPCA, long version, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, for those of you who don't know. I've worked at the ASPCA for about 10 years, and my role includes building campaign pages and emails that we use Movable for.
Terrific. All right. Carl.
Hi, my name is Carl Labise. I work for Everytown for Gun Safety. Everytown is the counterweight to the NRA, fighting in state battles across the country to prevent terrible gun laws and push for common sense gun safety measures. I am a national digital campaigner focusing on those federal legislative policies, as well as digital fundraising and grassroots mobilization.
Awesome. All right, so why don't we start with just a conversation about what email means to your organization. So Carl, do you want to tee that up?
Yeah, sure. If we're talking just pure revenue or fundraising in the digital realm, email is number one. It's key. We have millions of supporters across the country, and so we need a great way to sort of connect with them, engage with them, and give them actions to take. In a more traditional sense, direct mail has been the winner in terms of fundraising dollars, but what we've seen, especially this year, is sort of this huge uptick in America is really wanting to get behind the movement, get behind the mission, and do whatever it takes for us to sort of build this America that's free from gun violence. And so what we might see if things kind of persist is digital overtaking direct mail, and if we play our cards right, it'll be that way for years to come.
That's great. Robin, what about the DNC?
So the DNC's funding can be broken into 3 areas, one of which is online grassroots fundraising, the vast majority of which comes through email. The second is grassroots offline fundraising, which comes through our direct mail and telemarketing programs. And then the third is our finance department, who talks to high-dollar donors. So email is responsible for, this election cycle will be about 25 to 30% of the money raised for the organization. And what a lot of people actually don't know is that the DNC is a majority grassroots funded organization. 57% of our donations this election cycle have come from contributions of $200 or less.
Wow,
so
that's great. And Yasmin, what about the ASPCA?
For us, direct mail has been the main revenue generator for us, but that doesn't mean that email isn't important.
Sure.
It definitely allows us to reach out to our supporters and donors immediately when we're done on the ground and we need their support and their help. So although direct mail brings in more money, email is just as important, as are the other channels. They all serve a unique purpose, and sometimes one tends to influence the other.
I think all the marketers here can understand that, for sure. So a lot of people have been talking today about logistics and operations, because that can be where innovation and great strategies go to die. So maybe we could hear a little bit about your end-to-end process and the teams that support getting these emails out the door. So Robin, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So the DNC's email team touches all parts of the process, from writing the copy to coordinating with the design team on the creative, to coding it up in our ASP, to doing the QA process. For any given email, it takes 4 people on the team to load it up to get the sample check, and then 5 people total once we get it out the door. But that's also to say that we need to coordinate strongly with a lot of other departments. Every single piece of outbound content that we send has to go through our communications, research, and legal teams, and also any emails we send that highlight specific candidates have to be reviewed by our political teams.
So on average, is that a couple weeks to get something done?
If the political team is involved, definitely a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But generally anywhere from a week to 2 weeks.
Okay, great.
Time, yeah.
Carl, what about you guys?
Everytown's digital campaigns team is structured a little bit differently. So, I work on a national team that really kind of handles a lot of the federal legislative stuff, but there are a lot of state issues going on. And so we have 4 other campaigners that kind of split the country up into 4 regions. You got a Northeast pod, you got a Southern pod, you got a Western pod, and a Midwest pod. And so some similarities between the national team and the states team is that you have your digital campaigner, you might have someone from legal, you might have someone from litigation, policy, compliance, and then like a field team or whatever. But strictly speaking, for the national, generally what might happen is like the email gets copied or there's some strategy developed. It'll touch the national digital director, then go through the digital director because reasons. And then what happens is, depending on how it branches out, it will either go through a litany of folks, those same kind of individuals, legal, litigation, or whatever, or it might just go straight to the COO, who always reviews every single national email that goes out. And then from there, the email is built, it is coded, it's proofed by another campaigner for typos and things of that nature, reviewed by the lead campaigner who started drafting it, and then we send it or schedule it.
So is that weeks, days?
You know what, depending on the bottleneck at the time, it could be a week, it could be hours, it could be a day. The nature of the work is sometimes we just got to push it out.
Absolutely, yeah. Yasmin, tell us about the ASPCA.
It takes about 2 weeks for us, starting with the copy. We have a content team that creates the copy. Then our web designers, they pull images, build mock-ups. That has to be approved before one of us goes in and builds the actual email. Then we have to test it, we have to send it out for review. Those people have to approve it before it actually gets to go out.
Great, awesome. So our marketers in the room who work for more traditional retail and travel and hospitality organizations, they have obviously a lot of demands and pressures on their channels, but you guys have an additional pressure, which is having to respond to news flow as that happens. Can you just talk a little bit about the unique operational considerations given your missions and what that looks like on the ground? Carl, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, whenever a mass shooting happens, not only our audience, but the rest of America really kind of comes to Everytown for information. They want to know what happened. They want to know what actions they can take. They want to get involved. So really what happens on the digital side is we kind of go through this sort of rapid response protocol. And that kind of entails, one, doing a roll call, seeing who's available, who's not in the office, who can reach a computer within the next hour, whatever the case may be. We stop any scheduled emails from going out because we don't want to seem tone deaf. We changed the pop-up image that's on the website, to something that's just evergreen content, ways to get involved, to join a movement, whatever. And then we get together, we talk about what happened, we get some direction from leadership. And from there, we start thinking about what kind of graphics we need to use, what kind of email we need to send out, but more importantly, what call to action to give people. I mean, they're coming to us for really important information. We want to make sure that we're giving them meaningful actions so that way they can come away from that feeling as if they've actually done their part. And oftentimes what you'll see is this can be something that takes upwards to 12 hours of work, but it's important that we get it right that first time.
Absolutely. Yasmin, I know you guys have been in the news a lot lately with all of the recent hurricanes in the south. Can you talk about how you guys respond to weather events?
Right, so usually we take months to plan out emails, but whenever a disaster happens or whenever there's a raid, everything gets put on hold. And then the usual 2-week timeline gets condensed to about 24 hours.
Wow.
So that whole process that I just went through basically has to happen in a day.
Yeah.
And so we're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that the emails that we send out perform, because if they don't perform or do well, then we cannot fund those programs.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would also jump in and respond to what Carl said about not wanting to appear tone deaf. That's a really big thing for us as well, because we basically have to be prepared to throw our email calendar out the window on any given day, because if we have an email that's promoting our Blue Wave magnets for 2018 on a day when there is like a very serious Senate committee hearing, or if there is a shooting, we just have to be prepared to cut it out of the calendar altogether. And if we do want to get out with something in response, it's just deciding what is the right messenger, who is the right email sender, whether that's a staff sender or a surrogate, and then what is the right call to action. And I think one way we did that particularly well was earlier this year after the Parkland shooting in Florida. We sent out an email from former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was shot in the head back in, I think, 2011, 2010, and the call to action was to pledge to vote to support candidates who will take action on gun violence. So it's finding that moment and finding the right thing for people to do and not appear tone deaf.
We are talking a lot today about visual experiences, and I think that the bread and butter of direct marketing for nonprofits for many years was that letter, right? That just sort of very text-heavy letter with some sort of emotional language in there and some baseline personalization. But as the toolkit for marketers has really evolved to be much more visual, obviously that's changed the way you guys work. Can you talk a little bit about that, Robin?
Our program has taken a significant shift in the last few months since working with Movable Inc., transitioning from what I call a one-size-fits-all creative approach to a highly personalized experience that is giving our supporters tailored email content based on whether it's based on their previous donor history with the organization or giving them information on elections happening in their state, which we'll get into in a little bit.
And when you sort of realized that you had this capability available to you with Movable Inc., how did you sell that strategy internally? Did you get any pushback or questions on it?
So I am very fortunate because the head of my department is a former emailer. So she was fully bought into the need to use a tool like Movable Inc. So I'm lucky in that regard, but she did the making the pitch to the folks.
That's great. So Yasmin, can you talk a little bit about visual experiences and what they mean to the ASPCA?
The one thing that we always have to keep in mind is what type of images that we use, because we've learned that sometimes if something is too graphic or too upsetting, people tend to really get upset, and they definitely let us know. They'll send us an email or they'll call us up and say like, this was too much. But ironically, those emails perform really good, which is weird. But that's probably because it invokes a certain emotion and people feel like they need to give money and do something and help change that situation.
So we're in this room with 500 of the world's best email marketers, and you guys are competing for share of mind and share of wallet with these guys, and I don't think anyone would dispute that some of them maybe have some more resources than you do. So what do you do to get creative and stand out at that moment when you're neck and neck with 50% off and $400 flights to Miami and beautiful tailored visual experiences? Carl, can you share?
I think we're lucky to have an audience that knows what we're about. They know what to expect from our emails. They're already engaged, right? So what we should really be thinking about is the kind of content that we're doing. So we're able to kind of shift our campaigns on a tight pivot when necessary.
Do you hold your send times sometimes to wait for news flow to drop?
Yeah, all the time. It's actually a little nerve-wracking because, again, you're not working until 5 p.m., you're not working until 6, 7, you're working until whenever it happens. So if we're paying attention to an electoral race and there's a candidate who's running on a gun safety platform and we're like really rooting for that individual, then we're waiting for the polls to close. We're waiting for the announcement to be made so that we can send out a victory email or unfortunately not send anything out. So
yeah, sure. Robin, what about you guys?
Echoing what Carl said, knowing when to respond and doing the preparation in advance so that you know if a moment is going to hit and it's one you can prepare for. You can be out the door immediately in that moment when people are going to be more likely to respond. But also for us, just on a broader level for the DNC, the level of support that we can provide to candidates and state parties across the country is determined by the contributions of the grassroots donors we reach via email. So we lay out those stakes pretty clearly in our emails, and also with this year's midterms, some might say that the very future of our democracy depends on it. So just making the case and upping the urgency for our supporters who are already on board with the party. It's just a matter of giving them a concrete reason to take action in any given moment.
That's great. So why don't we actually go to some of these gorgeous emails so we can talk a little bit about the great campaigns that you guys are leading. So Robin, we'll start with you. And I think this first one that we have here is of a Texas donor. So why don't you take us through this beautiful creative?
So
right over your head.
This was the first email we sent through Movable Inc. where we gave people specific information on elections happening in their state. This is actually modeled off a direct mail piece that had gone out earlier in the spring, and it focuses on statewide races for Senate and for governor. And we showed people, one, the map of which seats are up in a given state on a national level, and then below we showed people a state-specific tile that listed whether or not they had a Democratic Senate nominee up for re-election or running for office. In the state of Texas, we named that Beto O'Rourke is challenging Senator Ted Cruz, and then we gave them a governor nominee if that primary had passed, and then we also gave specific information on House districts and whether or not their state had a GOP-held House district that Hillary Clinton had won in 2016, meaning it would be a flip opportunity in this year's election. So we had the one section that was state personalization, and then at the bottom there where you see the circles, we had donor personalization in that part below. So if they had contributed this year or last year, it showed them you've contributed a total of this much, your last donation was on this date, and then pivoting to the suggested donation on this email. And if they were a non-donor and had not yet contributed this election cycle, they got slightly altered language.
Where did the data come from ultimately to generate this data visualization? Was it a CSV file, or did we take it from a data source?
Data source.
Right.
Or it was through custom data sets that we build in our platform, Blue State Digital, and then we just feed those values through merge tag values.
That's great. What was the hardest part of QAing and setting this up?
The state-specific election information by a long shot.
Yeah.
That was a heavy QA process.
Sure, I can only imagine. Take us through this Ohio non-donor example.
So this example is just the same email, switching up who we show for a state. So obviously Ohio, it's going to be Senator Sherrod Brown's up for re-election, and then naming the Democratic nominee for governor, and then just swapping out that information according to people's state.
That's awesome. And you guys have done some really playful thing just with data visualization in general. So these are some fun graphics that you guys have done. Can you tell us a little bit more?
So this one right here is an example of the graphic from top to bottom for how it populated for a specific donor. These parts on the right and left are basically a list of all of the potential items that a donor could have seen, and then they collapsed according to whether or not they had taken that action. So up here on the top right, you see a lot of campaigns that we have done split fundraising with. The top two are special elections, the bottom three are senators up for re-election. So over the course of this year, we've been using our email program to give our supporters the opportunity to contribute directly to a campaign. And so we were showing them if they did that, and then the stuff below is just various donor tiers that we have for the Leadership Circle, Party Builders programs, and then whether or not a donor has contributed over $200 to get on our FEC report. And then the things behind me right here are non-fundraising related. If they committed to vote, if they bought something at our store, and we just listed them all out in a graphic based on the donors 2018 with the DNC and the various actions that they've taken.
That's great. What kinds of results did these strategies drive?
This email raised about double what we would have seen on a typical email graphic.
Yasmin, why don't you take us through some of these great examples for the ASPCA?
Right, so this was a petition email. The one on the left was sort of a control version. It's a typical email that we would do, but this time we decided why not try something else, and we decided to test an email that was shorter in copy with a black background. And that one ultimately won.
That's great. And with this data visualization on the poll numbers, the petition numbers?
Yes, and then on the final send, we decided to add the petition bar, which was from our website. We used the web crop tool, so that was really great. We were able to take something from the website and put it in an email, and it was live, and people loved it. They clicked and signed up, and we actually got some donations from it too, so it was really successful.
That's great. That's awesome. And then we've got our virtual 5K.
Right. This was a custom fundraising bar that we did for participants in our Team ASPCA virtual 5K race. And it was really fun for all of us, for us at the A and Movable Inc. So every single participant would get the bar at the bottom of the email to sort of remind them of the amount that they've raised so far, and to encourage them to fundraise and win some of the prizes.
Was that information live or was it merged in?
It was merged.
Okay, great. And how did this email perform?
It did really well. Every time we sent an email out, we definitely saw a spike in fundraising.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then we've got a really fun live poll.
Oh, these are fun. So yeah, we used the live poll tool to build these emails. Of course, the Kitten Vote email did really well. We got really good engagement from it. So
that's great. Do you use this data for any other campaigns, or this was really just a standalone?
No, this was just a standalone email. The Kitten campaign was about our kitten industry. We just wanted to call attention to it so that people knew what was going on and the need for fosters and help.
It's a great engagement play. Yeah. Awesome, thank you. Carl, let's get into some great campaigns for Everytown. I think our first one here is about these t-shirts.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic, but I'm still kind of floored by the other ones I saw. This is a t-shirt poll that we did, and some background. We do an annual sort of event / honoring called Wear Orange Weekend. It's the first weekend in June. It's hundreds of events planned around the country to honor the lives lost to gun violence as well as the survivors of gun violence. So some of these events are really sort of like community-based. They're like outreach, education, sometimes barbecues. It's a lot of fun. And so we do this sort of kickoff about a month and a half before Wear Orange Weekend, where we ask our audience to vote on the official t-shirt for Wear Orange. And so we've done this for the last couple of years, and engagement was fine, or so we thought, because when we sent out this email, we did the same standard. We had some copy, we had a link on top, and then we had this really awesome graphic and the polling on the bottom. What we found was, about 75% of the clicks were through the actual polling. People clicking on A, B, or C. They ignored the link on the top. They ignored the graphic itself. They just clicked on the letter, which was fascinating to see because, obviously people care about what other people are doing. It's that gamification. They feel like they're involved. And so the conversion rates really kind of showed, I don't remember, it was like a 119% increase in people who have taken action.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
It's pretty good.
In engagement. So what we did for that was we sent a follow-up email after we sent the winning t-shirt to those who voted with an additional discount code, which sort of kind of made them feel as if every time I take an action, outside of trying to end gun violence, I get rewarded, which kind of keeps them in the life cycle, which helps them sort of become that referral partner, which we heard from Verizon earlier today. So this could not have been possible without Movable Inc. and some of those challenges. I think Mira, our account manager, would know. I would reach out to her sporadically, like, okay, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. And then it works. So, this was fantastic, and a lot of people really enjoyed it.
All right, tell us about this March for Our Lives campaign.
Yeah, so I think everyone here is aware of the shooting that happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. A tragic mass shooting that we've seen far too often. And so what kind of was born from that was the March for Our Lives. So we were heavily involved in, sending out invitations and getting people around there. Our email list kind of grew exponentially since that shooting. So we were reaching new people who wanted to join and become part of these marches. So what we did was we would send out the events, locally context based off where they were, and then we would have a countdown timer set up in two ways. The first time, about like a couple of weeks before the event happened, which was March 24th, it would just be a countdown leading up to midnight on March 24th. And as they signed up for an event, it would be uniquely tied to the event that they went to or they're going to and the start time. So we used the countdown timer to really kind of get people amped up, because while it was a very devastating and terrible occurrence, the conversation around gun violence and the energy that you felt with the students and with adults was just at this sort of climax that everyone's just like, this is something that I'm excited to be a part of. So we wanted to make sure that when you're reading this email, you're not just getting like, okay, here's your stats, here's your event details, yada, yada, yada. It's like, you have 8 hours left, right? Yeah. Are you ready? Do you have everything you need? Here's your start time.
So you guys have pretty lean marketing stacks. As we mentioned, you don't have like all the resources in the world. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the other tools that you guys rely on day in, day out to do your jobs? Robin, you want to go?
Sure. So we rely on ActBlue for processing our online donations. And one thing that is great about ActBlue is that they make it very, very easy for us to be able to do split contributions on a form. It's just an extra click for adding basically any elected official across the country. The DNC can only do splits with federal candidates, so we've been doing a lot, like I mentioned, with senators. We've been doing split fundraising in special elections late last year and earlier this year, and then recently we just launched split fundraising for competitive House candidates, where we ask people in state to split a contribution between the DNC and House candidates running in their state. And that was just launched last week, so that would not be possible without ActBlue. Awesome. Also, we recently started working with Mobilize America, which is a digital organizing tool for creating events. And a lot of other campaigns and state parties use Mobilize for creating their events, and the DNC can now point our supporters to those campaigns and events the events hosted by campaigns across the country, so they can turn out to go to a phone bank or a canvas or a training in their state.
That's awesome. Yasmin, what do you guys use?
So we use mobile comments for our SMS campaigns. We use Optimizely for A/B testing on our website, which is amazing because you don't actually have to go in and touch any code. Everything is done in Optimizely.
Yeah.
And based on the results, then you decide if you should go in and make those changes permanently.
No more fighting over things.
No. And then we use Springboard for our donation, petition, advocacy, and peer-to-peer forms.
That's great. Carl, about you guys?
Yeah, so I didn't mention it earlier, but we do use mobile comments for SMS. We use ActBlue for online donations. We use email on acid to really kind of check to make sure our emails are looking good, especially as we get to the tabling and the borders when you're coding. And especially as we're using Movable ink and the graphics come in there, we want to ensure that it looks fantastic across as many platforms and mailers as possible. And we also use Shopify, that kind of like really houses our Everytown store for merch. But always looking for new tools to advance our digital techniques.
Well, I'm sure there's some folks here with some great ideas to share with you guys. So do you guys have anything that you would like to say to this audience? This is like the brain trust of the world's leading marketers, from across every vertical, and they are doing some of the most interesting cutting edge things. Do you have anything you'd like to leave them with, Carl?
Sure. I like that response. I have two things I want to leave you with. It's mostly just two websites. So, I think my job is to educate people who come to our website and who sign up for our mailing. They have an understanding about gun violence prevention and gun deaths, but not enough to really feel as if like they could take action any single day. So in order to educate, I think if you would be so inclined to visit everytownresearch.org/navigator, you'll be able to get like a countrywide view of how each individual state's gun laws are, how strong they are, how weak they are, and whether or not your state has really strong gun laws, how your neighboring state's weak gun laws can allow guns to be trafficked in there. So you might be wondering, I live in a really strong gun law state. Why is there so much deaths? Because your neighboring state has really terrible ones. And so that level of education can allow you to go to the next website, which is gunsensevoter.org, where if you just put in your address, you'll be able to kind of get a comprehensive list of all the candidates who are running on a gun safety platform this year, on a local level and on a state level. So there's no reason not to know if you're interested in gun violence prevention, how you can take action, and who you might want to vote for.
I'm sure a lot of folks in the room are already thinking about this, but just showing appreciation for our supporters is something that we've seen a lot of success with this year. Particularly in the political email space, that's not something people really give a lot of attention to. So it's definitely not any groundbreaking idea, but we've just seen a ton of success with acknowledging our supporters' past contribution history or any past involvement that they've had with the organization, and using our emails, whether it's Movable Inc. or just our normal text emails, to thread in conditional content there that acknowledges that past support before pivoting to the ask.
The asking again. Yeah, people like to be thanked.
Yes,
so
we do.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us for this conversation. Thank you again to our panelists.